Snow slams the cafe windows like fists, and the door bursts open on a scream. Emily staggers in, shaking so hard her teeth click, eyes wild with terror. Outside, a black SUV idles in the whiteout, headlights searching like predators. A man steps from the storm, hand on his coat, something heavy tucked under it. Jack Dalton rises from the corner booth, limping once, calm as a locked vault. An ex-Navy SEAL, broad-shouldered, weathered, moving like trouble has rules. Beside him, Ranger. The German Shepherd stands silent, ears up, amber eyes warning. Then a gun flashes near the glass, and Jack shifts between Emily and the door. Subscribe, comment, and share to see justice served. Break time, Sarah. Threes. The blizzard begins. Winter swallowed Bozeman in one white breath, turning streetlights into blurry halos and the world into a muffled room. Snow pressed against glass like it wanted inside. Jack Dalton sat with his back to the cafe wall because old habits did not negotiate. The navy winter parka hung heavy on his shoulders, mid-thigh length, dusted with melting flakes. Under it, the red and black plaid flannel showed at the collar, faded jeans, brown leather boots, everything practical, everything familiar. The left knee ached with the slow, stubborn pulse of a past life. The limp was subtle until it wasn't. He could still move fast, but he paid for it later, like interest on a debt he never asked for. Across the small table, Ranger stood with the stillness of a statue that could suddenly become a storm. The German Shepherd was 5 years old, black and tan, working line and muscular, ears alert, amber eyes steady. He did not pace. He did not whine. He watched. He breathed in the world with a kind of disciplined hunger. Jack watched the cafe instead. The place was called Miller's Corner, which sounded like a joke until you stepped inside and felt the warmth. Grace Miller had earned that warmth. She moved behind the counter like the room belonged to her, because it did, and because she treated people like they mattered. Grace was mid-40s, medium height, with a sturdy, capable build, a face softened by laugh lines, and blonde hair pulled into a messy bun that never quite stayed put. She wore a thick cream sweater under a brown apron, sleeves pushed up, hands always busy. Her eyes held a quick kindness, but there was steel under it. "2 coffees on the house tonight," she said, sliding a mug toward Jack like this was her way of keeping the storm outside. "Anybody willing to sit through this weather deserves a reward." Jack nodded once. He didn't waste words. His dark brown eyes, warm when they wanted to be, stayed sharp. He wasn't rude. He just didn't give the world more of him than it needed. A small bell above the cafe door jingled whenever someone entered, but tonight, it mostly chimed from the wind, shoving the door in tiny impatient taps. The town had the look of a place holding its breath. Radios crackled in the background, voices rising and falling through static. Grace kept one ear on the old radio behind the counter. A man's voice floated out, official but strained. "Whiteout conditions across Gallatin County. Emergency crews are grounded. Please stay off the roads. If you are not home, shelter in place. Shelter in place." Jack almost smiled. The phrase sounded neat, clean, like it could be folded and put away. Outside, the storm didn't care about neatness. Sheriff Tom Rayner had called earlier, telling Grace to keep the doors open if she could. Tom was a man in his early 50s, tall but slightly stooped from years in a duty belt, with a square face, heavy brows, and a gray mustache that made him look permanently unimpressed. He wore a tan sheriff's jacket and a knit cap pulled low, the type who didn't say much, but when he did, people listened. Tom hadn't shown up yet. Maybe the roads had finally won. Jack wasn't here for community service. He told himself that. Anyway, he was here because his truck didn't like ice, and because the highway out of town had already disappeared under a swelling wall of snow. He was here because sometimes, even a man who survived worse than weather learned to take a hint. Ranger's ears shifted, not toward the radio, toward the door. Jack's gaze followed, not hurried, not dramatic, just ready. The bell gave a weak jingle, and then the door flew open hard enough to slap the wall. A girl stumbled in on a gust of snow and panic. Emily Carter looked about 28, slim to the point of fragile, with pale skin gone almost translucent from cold. Her brown hair was tangled and wet, clinging to her cheeks in dark strands. Her face was narrow, lips chapped, eyes wide and glossy, like she'd been crying for miles. She wore a thin gray coat that was not made for Montana winter, a scarf wrapped wrong and too loose, and cheap boots already soaked through. Her hands shook so badly she struggled to pull the door closed behind her. Her first breath came out as a ragged sound, half sob, half gasp. Grace was around the counter instantly. "Honey, hey, come here. Sit down. You're freezing." Emily's eyes darted across the room, not landing on faces the way people do when they're looking for help. She was scanning for exits, threats, corners. She flinched when the door rattled again in the wind, as if expecting it to open on something worse than weather. Jack didn't move yet. He watched. He measured. He remembered what fear looked like when it wasn't a performance. Ranger stepped forward one pace, silent, his amber eyes fixed on Emily, and then just as quickly shifted past her to the glass. He inhaled. His posture changed in a way only Jack would notice. The dog wasn't alarmed. He was alert with purpose, like he'd smelled something that didn't belong. Emily clutched the edge of a chair, but didn't sit. I can't." Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard. I need somewhere for a minute." Grace guided her down anyway, firm but gentle. "You've got somewhere. You're safe in here." Emily let herself be lowered into the chair like her bones had forgotten how to hold her up. She stared at her hands, then at the cafe window, then back at her hands again. A strange rhythm, like a prayer she didn't believe would work. Jack felt the old familiar irritation rise, sharp and quiet. He hated bullies. He hated predators. He hated the way fear made good people small. Grace wrapped a blanket around Emily's shoulders. "What's your name?" Emily hesitated. "Emily." A beat. Emily Carter. Jack's attention tightened, not because the name meant anything to him, but because she said it like it might get her killed. The radio hissed again, and the announcer's voice returned, thin with static. Reports of a vehicle incident near the old county line. One individual unaccounted for. If you are in the area. Emily jolted at the words. Her hand flew to her pocket, like she was checking for something. Then she remembered herself and pulled it back, forcing calm into her face that didn't fit. Ranger's gaze stayed steady. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He simply watched her, and then watched the door, as if tracking two storms at once. Grace's smile faltered. "Emily, if you're in trouble, we need to call Sheriff Rayner." Emily flinched. "No, please, not." The cafe lights flickered once, twice, then steadied again. Outside, through the snow-glazed window, movement shifted. A dark shape, then another. A vehicle rolled past, slow as a stalking animal. Black. Boxy. Too clean for this weather. Jack's spine went rigid with recognition that had nothing to do with the truck itself, and everything to do with how it moved. Ranger's ears lifted higher, amber eyes narrowing on the whiteout beyond the glass. His muscles tightened, but he didn't make a sound. Emily saw it too. Her hand tightened around the mug until her knuckles went white. "They found me," she breathed. Jack's mind ran down a familiar list of options. Doors, windows, lines of sight, people in the room. How many? How scared? How fast he could move with a bad knee. How fast Ranger could move without losing control. He hated this. Not the fight. The fact that it always found someone who didn't deserve it. Grace looked between them, confusion turning to fear. "Jack, what is going on?" Jack didn't answer yet. He watched the drifting snow beyond the window and waited for the next sign. The one that would tell him whether this night was just a blizzard or something worse wearing a blizzard like a mask. Ranger let out a low hiss, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. In the midst of the swirling white snow, a figure stood motionless but left no footprints. Snow kept chewing at the windows, and the cafe felt smaller with every breath. Jack didn't look away from the drifting white outside. The shape he'd seen had been too still, too sure of itself. In weather like this, the only people standing around were either lost or hunting. He shifted his weight, careful of the left knee. Ranger stayed planted beside Emily's chair. black and tan body angled like a shield, amber eyes fixed on the door and then the glass. Reading the world in scent and motion. Grace swallowed hard. "Jack, what is going on?" Jack kept his voice low. "Somebody out there wants her." Emily's breath hitched. She pulled the blanket tighter, like fabric could stop bullets. "I didn't mean to drag anyone into it." "Too late," Jack said. Not unkindly, just honest. He looked at Grace, locked the door. Grace hesitated, then moved fast. The latch clicked. The sound landed heavy. The radio hissed again, and the announcer's voice broke through in pieces. "Power lines down. County dispatch overwhelmed. Please." Then silence, the kind that felt personal. Ranger's ears twitched. He took one step toward the front windows, nostrils flaring. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He simply became more present. The way a storm becomes more present right before it hits. Jack watched the street. Headlights surfaced in the whiteout. Two dull circles pushing through the snow. The black SUV rolled closer. Tires crunching slow, controlled. Not sliding, not panicking. Whoever drove it knew exactly what they were doing. The vehicle stopped across from the cafe. Just far enough to keep distance. Just close enough to pressure everyone inside. A door opened. Wind shoved snow in sideways sheets. A man stepped out. Tall, broad. Wearing a dark coat with the hood up. His face was half hidden. But Jack caught the posture. Confident. Unhurried. Like the world owed him passage. Emily pressed both hands to her mouth. A muffled sound slipped through her fingers. Grace's eyes went wide. "Oh my God." Jack raised a hand. Palm down. A silent order to stay still. He didn't reach for anything. He didn't need to. Violence was a tool, not a reflex. The man outside didn't approach right away. He walked along the curb, slow, looking at the cafe windows as if he were shopping. Jack's mind ran through angles. Glass. Distance. Light inside making them silhouettes. He killed half the lights with 2 quick steps, moving with restraint. Knee complaining but obeying. Grace started to speak, and Jack shook his head once. Emily stared at him, eyes begging without words. "I have something," she whispered. "They think I still have it." "What is it?" Jack asked. Emily's voice came out thin. "Proof. About Gordon Pike." The name dropped like a stone. Grace blinked. "Pike. Like Pike Construction." Emily nodded, tears spilling now. "I worked in accounting. I saw numbers that didn't make sense. I found payments. People getting paid who didn't exist. Then I found the real list." Jack's jaw tightened. He'd seen corruption wear 100 different suits. The suit always looked clean until you got close enough to smell it. Emily swallowed, forcing herself to keep going. "I copied it. I didn't know what else to do. I thought if I just handed it to someone." A loud knock hit the cafe door. 3 sharp blows that cut through the wind. Grace flinched so hard she nearly dropped the teapot. Ranger didn't move, but his muscles tightened under his coatless fur. A silent warning made visible. Jack stepped between the door and Emily, broad shoulders filling space. He spoke without raising his voice. "Who is it?" A man's voice came from outside, muffled by the storm but smooth. "Practiced. Evening. Search and rescue." Jack watched the frosted window beside the door. A shadow shifted. Then another. "How many?" Jack asked, still calm. "2 of us," the voice said. "We're checking businesses, making sure nobody's in distress." Grace looked at Jack, hope flashing in her face like a match. Then doubt. "Jack, what if it's real?" Jack didn't answer her first. He listened. Ranger's ears stayed up. His amber eyes didn't soften. That was the answer. Jack moved to the narrow side window, just enough to see without being seen. 2 men stood near the door. Both wore dark jackets. Reflective stripes meant to suggest official work. Their faces were mostly covered by scarves. Their posture was wrong for rescuers. Too squared, too ready. And their boots didn't have the heavy, uneven snow clumps you got from trudging through deep drifts. The soles looked cleaner than the storm would allow. Jack turned back. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Not rescue." Emily's eyes widened, and she nodded like she already knew. Grace's mouth trembled. "What do we do?" Jack glanced around the cafe. 2 older customers sat frozen in a booth. A couple in their 60s, bundled in puffy coats, faces pale with fear. A teenage barista Grace had hired for weekends stood behind the counter, wide-eyed and shaking. People who hadn't signed up for any of this. Jack hated that part most. He kept his tone steady. Nobody moves unless I say, lights stay low. Grace, get everyone away from the windows. Grace swallowed and nodded, moving with surprising control. Her fear didn't vanish, but she carried it like a tray, careful not to spill. The knock came again, harder. Ma'am? The outside voice called. Open up. We're here to help. Jack leaned close to the door without touching it. What's the dispatcher code for this sector? Silence. Then the voice sharpened. Sir, don't make this difficult. Jack's eyes narrowed. That's what I thought. A third shadow appeared at the edge of the window. Someone else moving in. More than two. Emily's breathing turned shallow. Ranger shifted his stance, placing himself fully between her and the door. Still no bark. Just presence. Jack calculated. If they forced the door, he had seconds. He could use the narrow entryway as a funnel. He could control the first man through. He could disable without killing if he had to. But every move had to be clean. Grounded. Real. Grace guided the older couple toward the back hallway. The teen followed, clutching a phone with no signal, eyes shining with tears. Emily whispered, They'll hurt you. They don't care who's in the way. Jack looked at her. I care. Outside. Metal scraped. Something thin slid near the doorframe. Testing the latch. Jack drew a slow breath. The kind he'd learned to take before breaching a room. He didn't feel heroic. He felt tired. But the tiredness didn't matter when someone weaker needed a wall. Ranger's nostrils flared, and his head angled toward the side window again. A new scent. A new approach. Jack moved fast, despite the knee. Silent boots on tile. He peered through the side window. One of the men had stepped away from the door and was circling toward the back of the building, shoulders hunched against the wind. He carried something under his coat that made his arms stiff. A weapon. Jack turned back, voice low but absolute. They're not here to talk. The cafe lights flickered again, and for a split second, the street outside flashed brighter headlights, sweeping, searching. Then the black SUV's engine revved slightly, like a beast clearing its throat. Jack positioned himself at the entryway, shoulders squared, ready to meet the first push. Ranger stood beside him, silent, amber eyes locked on the door, as if daring it to open. Outside, the scraping stopped. In the sudden quiet, a new sound rose from the storm footsteps, faster now, coming from the back of the cafe. And Jack realized this wasn't going to be one door to hold. It was going to be every door they could find. The footsteps at the back came fast, sloppy for men trying to look official. Jack moved first. His left knee complained, a hot stitch under the navy winter parka, but he kept the limp quiet, red and black flannel at his collar, faded jeans, brown leather boots, nothing flashy, nothing new, just the same uniform he'd worn through worse nights than this. Ranger slid with him, black and tan muscle moving like a shadow that understood geometry. No bark. No sound. Ears up, amber eyes locked on the dark hall behind the counter. Grace froze near the register, mid-40s and tough, but her hands trembled around a phone that refused to give her a signal. Her blonde hair had started to fall loose from the messy bun, and the fear in her eyes wasn't for herself. Emily sat rigid in the chair, 28 and shaking under the blanket, brown hair plastered to her cheeks, lips cracked, eyes too wide. She looked like someone who'd been running long before the storm started. Jack held up 2 fingers to Grace, then pointed to the back hallway. 2. He gestured again. Stay low. The scraping at the front door stopped. That was worse than the scraping. A soft thump came from the rear entrance, like someone testing it with a shoulder. Another thump. Harder. Jack stepped behind the counter and reached under a shelf. He found what he expected in any place that served hot coffee to cold people. A heavy metal flashlight and a red fire extinguisher. He didn't grip them like weapons. He held them like tools. Ranger's nostrils flared, his head angled slightly, scenting the air, currents drifting in from the back. The dog's stillness sharpened. Not frantic, not panicked, focused. Jack leaned toward Emily without taking his eyes off the hallway. Where's your proof? Emily's voice was thin. Not here. Where? Emily. She swallowed. A copy is somewhere safe. I didn't come in empty-handed. Jack believed her. He also believed the men outside didn't need to be sure. They just needed to be confident enough to hurt people until the truth fell out. The rear door rattled, and the frame groaned. Grace whispered, "Jack, get everyone in the storage room," Jack said, low and steady. Now, Grace didn't argue. She moved fast, guiding the older couple and the teenage barista down the side corridor. The barista was about 17, skinny, with curly dark hair stuffed under a beanie and a face that still held a kid's softness. He wore a green hoodie under his café apron and looked seconds away from crying. But he followed Grace like she was a lifeline. Jack stayed with Emily, not because she was special, because she was the target. The rear door bucked again. Then the handle clicked. Jack's eyes narrowed. Somebody had a pry bar, or the lock had been cheap. Either way, the door opened a few inches, letting the storm breathe into the building. A man pushed through. He looked early 30s, tall and thick through the shoulders, with a shaved head and a hard face that didn't soften, even when he tried to smile. His jacket had reflective striping like rescue gear, but his eyes didn't scan for injuries. They scanned for leverage. His gloved right hand stayed too close to his waistband. He didn't expect resistance. He expected fear. Jack stepped into the narrow space between the counter and the hallway, turning his body sideways to reduce target area. Fire extinguisher in one hand, flashlight in the other. "Calm. Evening," Jack said. The man blinked, thrown off by a voice that wasn't pleading. "We're here to—" Jack cut him off with one quiet sentence. "Back out." The man's gaze flicked past Jack, toward Emily. Hunger. Confirmation. He shifted his weight, preparing to rush. Ranger moved, not at the man's throat, not wildly. He stepped into view, black and tan and muscular, ears high, amber eyes fixed, a silent warning in pure posture. The dog didn't bark. He didn't growl loud. He simply promised consequences. The man hesitated for half a second. Jack used the half second. He snapped the fire extinguisher upward and discharged a short burst, not a cloud to fill the room. Just a sharp spray aimed at the man's face and hands. White powder erupted, blinding, choking, disorienting. The man cursed and flailed. Jack closed the distance with controlled steps, knee stiff but functional. He used the flashlight like a baton, striking the man's wrist once hard, precise, forcing the weapon hand to open before a gun ever cleared the waistband. Metal clattered to the floor. Jack kicked it under the counter without looking. The man swung blind. Jack caught the arm, rotated it, and drove him into the wall with a shoulder pin. No punch, no rage, just leverage. The kind of force that ended fights before they turned into funerals. "Don't," Jack said into his ear, voice flat. "Not in here." The man tried to buck free. Ranger pressed closer, teeth visible but not biting, body blocking the exit. The dog's amber eyes never left the man's face. No sound, no mercy, no chaos. A second man barreled in behind the first, smaller but faster, maybe late 20s, with a narrow face and a scruffy beard. He wore the same fake rescue jacket, hood up, cheeks red from cold. His eyes were bright with adrenaline and bad decisions. He saw Jack controlling his partner and went for Emily. Jack anticipated it. He stepped sideways, cutting off the line, putting his body between the runner and the chair. The second man shoved at Jack's chest. Jack didn't shove back. He redirected. One hand caught the wrist. The other guided the elbow, and Jack used the man's forward momentum to turn him into the counter. The impact was loud but not deadly. A coffee cup toppled and shattered. The man groaned, trying to rise. Jack set a knee into his back, careful, controlled, pinning him just long enough to cuff his hands with an extension cord yanked from behind the espresso machine. Not elegant, not official, effective. "Grace," Jack called, not loud, just sharp enough to carry. "Tape." From the storage room doorway, Grace reappeared with a roll of duct tape like she'd been born holding it. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady, mid-40s, sturdy build, and the kind of bravery that showed up wearing an apron. She tossed it. Jack caught it and secured the second man's wrists, then turned back to the first. The shaved-head man was coughing, eyes watering, trying to wipe powder away with gloved hands. Jack kept him pinned with a forearm across the shoulder and used the tape and cord together, binding wrists and ankles. He didn't tighten until bone creaked. He didn't gloat. He didn't threaten. He just made sure they couldn't hurt anyone. Ranger held position the entire time, guarding the rear door with a stillness that felt like a locked gate. Emily was crying silently now, both hands over her mouth. "They're not going to stop," she whispered. Jack glanced toward the front of the cafe. Through the dim window, the black SUV's headlights brightened, sweeping the glass as if the driver could see through snow and fear. Then the radio on the counter crackled back to life for a heartbeat, and a strained voice punched through the static. "Father Cole. St. Bridget's. Stuck." The signal died again. Jack looked at Emily. "St. Bridget's Church. That's where you hit it, isn't it?" Emily's eyes widened in a way that answered without words. Jack's jaw tightened, and he felt the night shift into something colder than weather. Outside, the SUV engine revved once, slow and deliberate, like whoever was in charge had decided to escalate. Jack kept the two men on the floor long enough to make sure panic did not make anyone else do something stupid. Grace stood by the storage room door, clutching the duct tape with both hands like it was a lifeline. Her cheeks were flushed from fear and heat, and her eyes kept flicking to the windows. Emily stayed near the chair, blanket tight around her shoulders, breathing shallow. She watched Jack the way drowning people watched shore. Ranger held the rear entry with a stillness that felt like a warning sign. Black and tan, muscular, ears high, amber eyes steady. No bark, no gear, no wasted motion. Jack's mind ran faster than his body ever could. Two men inside, one SUV outside. That meant command and control. That meant more eyes. That meant someone thought this town, this storm, and this little cafe were a closed box. He hated when people treated humans like inventory. The shaved-head man coughed and blinked powder away, his eyes watering. Up close, he looked early 30s, thick neck, bruiser build, hard face with a thin scar along his cheekbone. Even in fake rescue gear, he carried himself like hired muscle. The scruffy one was late 20s, lean, twitchy, with a narrow face and a half-grown beard. His fear was loud in his pupils, not remorse. Just fear of consequences from people worse than Jack. Jack crouched, careful of the left knee. Navy winter parka creasing at the elbows, red and black plaid flannel at the collar, faded jeans, brown leather boots planted like anchors. He spoke to the shaved-head man first. "Name." The man spat white powder. "You don't need my name." Jack nodded once, like he accepted that. Then he reached into the man's jacket pocket and pulled out a phone. A burner, cheap, no case, the kind of device made for short lives. Jack held it up where the man could see it. "Who pays you?" The man's jaw tightened. "Construction," he said, like the word alone could open doors. Grace sucked in a breath. She knew the town's money. Everyone did. Jack looked at the screen. It was locked, but not well. He didn't need a password to read what popped up. A new message slid across the top bar. "Move fast. Weather is our cover." Then another. "Don't shoot in the cafe. We need the drive." Jack's stomach went cold. He kept his face calm anyway. "Drive," he repeated quietly. He glanced at Emily. Emily's eyes went glossy. She shook her head once, like a child caught with a secret she never wanted. Jack turned back to the shaved-head man. "Who is we?" The man's breathing got rough. "You're making a mistake." Jack leaned in, voice low and flat. "You came into a building full of civilians with a gun and a lie. That's the mistake." Ranger shifted 1 inch, just enough to remind everyone in the room what control looked like. The dog's gaze never left the men. Not hatred, not fury, just unblinking certainty. Grace whispered, "Jack, the SUV." Jack didn't look yet. He listened first. The storm outside had its own rhythm, but there were other sounds hidden inside it. A door opening, a foot dragging, something metal tapping lightly. Ranger's ears flicked toward the front. Jack stood and moved to the window without stepping into full view. He used the dark reflection of the glass to watch the street. The black SUV was still there, engine running. Headlights swept slow across the cafe, then stopped. The driver's side door opened. A figure stepped out, taller than the others, posture confident. Hood up, face still hidden. He lifted a hand, not waving, signaling, and the SUV's lights clicked off. That was not retreat. That was decision. Jack felt the cafe's warmth turn thin. He went back to the counter and checked the burner phone again. The last messages were short, clipped, like they were talking to men who understood code. Check rear. Cut them off. St. Bridget's is next. Jack's eyes narrowed. He didn't know Father Cole well, but he knew what a church meant in a town like this. Shelter. A place people ran when they ran out of options. He also knew what criminals did with places people trusted. Emily's voice trembled. They know about St. Bridget's. Jack didn't answer her right away. He scanned the phone for contacts. For anything that looked like a name. There weren't names, just numbers and short labels. One label stood out. P. Cole. Jack's jaw tightened. He held the phone up to Emily. You called him. Emily swallowed. I didn't know where else to go. I thought a church would be safe. Jack believed she meant it. He also believed Pike's people counted on that belief. A faint crackle rose from the cafe radio again, like the storm was briefly letting go of the signal. St. Bridget's. This is Father Cole, if anyone hears. The voice was older, steady but strained. Father Cole sounded like a man forcing calm through cold and fear. Then, behind the words, another sound slipped through, a softer voice. Hi, a child trying not to cry. Grace's head snapped up. Lily. Jack turned. A small figure stood half hidden behind the storage room doorframe. Lily Ann looked about tens, petite, with a round face, freckles across her nose, and light brown hair in a messy braid that had escaped at the sides. She wore a puffy pink coat too big for her, and pajama pants with little stars, like she'd been hurried out of bed. Her eyes were wide, but her chin lifted with stubborn courage. She clutched a stuffed rabbit by one ear like it was a weapon. Grace rushed to her and pulled her close, one hand pressing the girl's head into her sweater. Grace's voice shook, but she kept it gentle. You're okay. Stay here. Baby. Lily's gaze slipped past Grace to Jack, then to Ranger. That dog doesn't look scared, she whispered. Jack almost smiled, but the moment didn't last. Ranger's nostrils flared. He turned his head toward the rear hallway and froze. Body going tighter than before. Not alarm, not panic. A precise change in posture that meant one thing. Something was wrong. Jack moved fast, knee protesting, and followed Ranger's line. Near the rear door, tucked beside a trash bin, sat a small red gas can. The cap was loose. The smell of fuel cut through coffee and cinnamon like a knife. Jack's throat tightened. He lifted it carefully, slow enough not to slosh. He carried it to the sink and tightened the cap with controlled hands. Grace's face went white. They were going to burn us out. Jack nodded once. This was bigger than getting one frightened woman back. This was control, pressure, a plan that used weather, fear, and a town's trust like tools. He looked at the two bound men on the floor. Who's feeding you information in Bozeman? The scruffy one laughed once, shaky and mean. Everybody talks, he said. You just gotta know who to pay. Jack stared at him until the laugh died. Outside, the storm roared again, and for one breath, the world sounded like an ocean. Jack glanced at Emily. If your proof is at St. Bridget's, we can't wait. Emily's hands trembled. If we go there, they'll follow. Jack looked at Ranger. The dog met his eyes. Amber steady, posture firm, like he'd already accepted the path. Jack took the burner phone and slipped it into his pocket. His voice stayed calm, but it carried weight. Then we move before they're ready. The phone vibrated once more against his thigh. A final message lighting the screen through the fabric. Phase 2. Church. Jack did not waste time arguing with the storm. He gave Grace a fast set of instructions, calm and clipped, like he was handing her a recipe. Keep them tied. Keep everyone in the storage room. If the SUV moves, stay away from the windows. If you hear glass, get low. Grace's face was pale, but her eyes held, mid-40s, sturdy and brave in a brown apron. She nodded like she understood what fear was and decided to work anyway. "And you," Jack said to Emily, "stay on my right. No running unless I tell you." Emily's chin trembled. 28. Slim and shaking under that blanket. She nodded hard. Like agreement could hold her together. Ranger waited at the threshold. Black and tan and muscular. Ears up, amber eyes steady. No gear, no sound. The dog's stillness felt like a promise. Jack opened the rear door just enough to look. Snow hit his face like sand. The world outside was a white wall with teeth. He stepped out first. Navy winter parka taking the blow. Red and black plaid flannel at the collar. Faded jeans. Brown leather boots that sank into drifts. His left knee flared with pain, but he set it aside like an object on a shelf. Emily followed, shoulders hunched, one hand gripping her coat as if it might tear away in the wind. Ranger moved between them and the street, not crowding, not pulling, just guiding with posture. The black SUV's shape was a darker bruise in the storm, somewhere beyond the cafe front. Jack did not head that way. He went into the alley and cut behind the buildings, using walls to break the wind and hide movement. He counted steps, checked corners, listened for engines, for doors, for the small human noises that meant someone was close. Ranger did the rest in silence. The dog's nose lifted and turned, reading the air like print. He paused once at a drift piled high by a fence, then shifted left, choosing a route Jack might have missed. Ranger did not lead like a pet. He led like a professional. St. Bridget's church appeared gradually, stone and dark wood rising out of the snowfall like something ancient refusing to be buried. Its stained glass windows were dim, the shapes of saints and candles swallowed by ice. The front doors were shut, not locked, shut, like someone had pulled them closed in a hurry. Jack's breath came out slow. He kept Emily behind him and pushed one door open with his shoulder, then stopped and listened before stepping through. The church smelled like cold stone, candle wax, and old pine. A voice came from the nave, strained but steady. "Hello?" Father Cole stepped into view near the first row of pews, early 60s, average height and lean, face lined by years of listening. His hair was gray and thinning, his eyes alert despite exhaustion. He wore a black sweater under a simple clerical collar, and his hands were red from cold. Relief crossed his face, then tightened into concern when he saw Emily. "You brought trouble," he said quietly, not accusing, just naming reality. Emily flinched. "I tried not to," Jack said. "We got a message. Are you hurt?" Father Cole nodded toward the side aisle. "Not me. A volunteer." A man lay on a pew with a towel pressed to his head. He looked late 30s, broad through the chest. Brown hair matted with blood at the temple. His eyes were open, unfocused, but he was breathing. He wore a reflective vest over a flannel shirt, like he had been helping before the storm decided to turn cruel. "I heard a vehicle outside," Father Cole said. Then shouting, "They came in like they owned the place." He tried to stop them. They hit him with something hard. Jack's jaw locked. He kept his voice low. "Did they take anything?" Father Cole swallowed. "They tore through the office. They demanded a drive." Emily's shoulders collapsed. "It's here," she whispered. "I hid a copy here." Jack looked at her. "Where?" Emily pointed toward the altar, toward a small statue tucked near the candlestand. Behind the base, in a plastic sleeve. Jack moved with Ranger beside him. He checked the sight lines as he walked. Side door, choir loft stairs, confessional, columns, places a gun could hide, places a man could hide. Ranger paused at the center aisle and looked up, ears angled. Jack followed the dog's gaze. A faint crunch, not snow, wood, someone shifting weight above them. Jack stopped Emily with one hand, palm light against her shoulder. "Don't move." Father Cole's eyes widened. "What is it?" Jack didn't answer. He lifted the heavy metal candlestick base from a nearby stand, held it like a tool. Then he moved, fast, quiet, careful on the bad knee. He crossed to a column and leaned into its shadow, looking up toward the choir loft rail. The storm wind made the building creak, but that other sound was there again, controlled now, trying to be silent. Ranger stepped forward one pace and stared upward. amber eyes unblinking. A figure appeared at the loft rail. A man in a dark jacket, hood up, face half covered, late 20s or early 30s, lean, eyes sharp. He held a pistol too close to his chest, like he was ready to aim down at the altar. He saw Ranger first. The man's finger tightened. Ranger lunged, not barking, not roaring, just a sudden blur of disciplined force. He launched up the first steps of the loft staircase like he'd been built for this exact moment. The man fired. The shot cracked through the church and slammed into wood, splintering the rail a foot from where Father Cole stood. The sound echoed like thunder in a cathedral of ice. Jack moved at the same time, angled body. Using pillars as cover, he did not charge into open space. He closed distance in sections, one safe pocket to the next. Emily covered her mouth, choking back a scream. Father Cole pulled her behind the altar with the instinct of a man who'd hidden people before. Upstairs, Ranger reached the loft. The German shepherd hit the man's forearm with a hard clamp, not tearing, not wild, just enough to drop the weapon. The pistol clattered and slid across the wood floor. The man yelled, a raw sound, and tried to kick. Ranger held. Then released on command he never heard but somehow understood. Backing one step, blocking the man's escape route with his body, Jack arrived at the staircase base. Breath controlled, candlestick base raised. Down, Jack called, voice like iron. The man looked at Ranger, then down at Jack, then toward the rear loft door. He chose the door. Bad choice. Ranger shifted sideways, silent and absolute, cutting him off. Jack climbed the steps, knee burning. At the top, he pinned the man against the wall with shoulder pressure and the weight of the candlestick base, not striking, just controlling. "Who sent you?" Jack said. The man spat. "You're too late." The church doors slammed open below, and wind poured in with snow. More men, boots on stone. A voice carried through the nave, smooth and cold. Jack Dalton. Jack's head turned. Gordon Pike stepped into the doorway like he belonged there. Mid-50s, tall and fit in a way money could maintain. Sharp face, clean jaw, salt and pepper hair under a hood that didn't hide the expensive cut of his winter coat. His eyes were calm, not human calm, business calm. Behind him were two armed men, shoulders squared, scanning like they'd trained for this kind of job. Pike looked at Emily. "Hand it over. You don't have to make this harder." Jack kept his hands on the man he'd pinned. He called down, "You brought guns into a church." Pike's smile was thin. Weather makes people desperate. Jack's mind snapped into a plan so fast it felt like instinct. He didn't win by strength. He won by timing. "Father," Jack said, not looking away. "Kill the lights." Father Cole blinked once, then moved. He disappeared into the side office and yanked the breaker. The church went dim, lit only by a few stubborn candles and the gray bleed of snowlight through stained glass. Pike's men raised their guns, startled, trying to find targets in the gloom. Jack released the pinned man and shoved him forward, hard enough to make noise, to create confusion, to draw eyes. Then Jack threw the fire extinguisher he had grabbed back at the cafe into the open nave. It hit the floor and discharged in a violent white cloud, powder blooming across the center aisle like sudden fog. Men coughed. Visibility dropped. Ranger moved through the haze like he owned it. Jack used the columns, kept his body tight, moved in angles. He didn't swing wildly. He didn't shout. He disarmed one man by catching the barrel and driving it down, then slamming the man's wrist against stone until the grip failed. He took the weapon and kicked it away, deep into the powder cloud. The second man tried to circle. Ranger cut him off without biting, forcing him backward with silent pressure and one sharp snap of teeth in the air. Pike stepped back toward the doors, realizing he wasn't controlling the room anymore. Outside, a new sound grew through the storm. Engines, multiple, a siren, muffled but real. Sheriff Tom Rayner burst into the doorway with two deputies behind him, faces wrapped in scarves, rifles held ready but disciplined. Tom's mustache was dusted with snow, eyes fierce and focused. "Drop it," Tom roared. Pike froze, caught between storm and law. Jack held still, hands visible now, breathing hard, knees screaming, face unreadable. Ranger stood beside him, amber eyes locked on Pike like a judge that never blinked. Pike lifted his hands slowly, smile gone. His eyes slid toward Jack, and for the first time, something like disbelief crossed his face. Tom cuffed Pike himself. It was messy after that, in the way real endings always were. Statements. Radios finally catching signal. Deputies hauling the bound men out into the white. Father Cole kneeling by the injured volunteer, whispering prayer like stitches. Emily retrieved the small plastic sleeve behind the statue base with shaking fingers. Inside was a drive, plain and harmless looking for something that had almost gotten people killed. Tom glanced at it and then at Emily. "You did the right thing," he said. Gruff, like compliments, hurt his teeth. Emily started to cry, and this time it sounded like relief. Dawn arrived like a soft apology. The storm loosened its grip, not gone, but tired. By evening, Miller's corner was bright again. Grace had candles on every table, and the older couple sat close together, hands intertwined. The teenage barista moved like he'd aged a year, but he was smiling. Father Cole came in with a small group from the church, shoulders wrapped in thick coats, faces still pale but alive. Lillian carried her stuffed rabbit and walked straight to Ranger. "That dog saved everybody," she said. Matter of fact. Ranger lowered his head once, accepting her small offered cookie with careful gentleness. Grace set a plate in front of Jack without asking. Hot stew, bread, the kind of meal that felt like being forgiven by the world. Jack sat near the wall again, because habits did not disappear overnight. His navy winter parka stayed on. The flannel collar showed. He watched the room, watched the light, watched Ranger, for the first time in a long time. His chest loosened. Grace raised a mug and cleared her throat. "To the ones who didn't look away," she said. Father Cole added quietly. "And to the faith that holds when the wind tries to take everything." People murmured amen. Not performative, just grateful. Someone started humming Silent Night, and others joined in, voices imperfect and warm. The cafe sounded like a small, stubborn victory. Jack didn't sing. He just rested his hand on Ranger's neck for one steady moment, and the dog leaned into it like that was enough. Outside, snow fell softer now, and the streetlights made halos again. Not ominous this time, just beautiful. Some nights feel like they were built to break people. A blizzard closes the roads, fear closes the throat, and the world shrinks down to one warm room and one hard choice. But that is often where God moves the clearest. Not with thunder, but with quiet protection that shows up right on time. In Bozeman, safety did not arrive as a perfect plan. It arrived as steady courage. A community that refused to turn away, and a worn-out veteran who still knew how to stand between danger and the innocent. And beside him was Ranger, loyal without needing praise, brave without needing a headline. Dogs like that are reminders that love can be disciplined, that comfort can be fierce, and that grace can have four paws and amber eyes. If you have ever felt alone in a storm, remember this. God can send help through ordinary doors, in ordinary people, in small acts that become miracles when they matter most. Share if you believe in angels with paws. Comment amen to bless our veterans. Subscribe for the next story.